Hello again, and welcome back to the Sleepy Atom. Tonight we're drifting softly into one of the strangest questions ever asked in science. What does space smell like? It sounds impossible, doesn't it? Space is silent, cold, a vacuum. How could it smell like anything at all? But astronauts who've returned from spacewalks say the scent is real. It clings to their suits, dances on the airlocks, and lingers in memory like an invisible souvenir from beyond Earth. They say it smells like burnt metal, seared steak, welding fumes, and something else they can't quite describe. And that's where we'll begin. Because smell isn't just about our nose, it's about memory, emotion, and meaning. The scent of something lost, the ghost of a place we've never touched. So lie back, let your body sink gently into rest, and imagine this. You've just stepped back inside from a walk outside the spaceship. You close the airlock, and something strange greets your senses. A scent, unmistakable, haunting, not from Earth, but not entirely alien either. Let's drift there together now, the first sniff of space. When astronauts began walking in space, they returned not only with stories of views, but smells. The moment they stepped back inside, opened their helmets, and took a breath, they noticed it. A scent hanging faintly on their suits, on the tools, inside the airlock. Something burnt, something sharp. It wasn't perfume or flowers, it was strange, smoky, a little metallic, but it felt alive. They described it as hot metal or seared steak. Some said welding sparks. Some compared it to gunpowder. Others didn't know how to describe it at all, but all agreed it was real. It was consistent, and it made them stop and notice, not with fear, but with wonder. But how can space have a smell at all? Isn't it a vacuum? Isn't it empty? The answer is yes and no. Space is a vacuum. There's no air, no breeze, no oxygen to carry scent. But your suit, your equipment, collects traces. Ionized gases, solar wind residue, atomic particles that touch the stars and rode the cosmos down to your gloves. And when these hit the oxygen inside the ship, they react. They fizzle. They spark tiny chemical changes, like fire meeting air. That's what the astronauts smelled. The evidence of the universe leaving fingerprints. It wasn't just interesting, it was unforgettable. Because smell connects to memory stronger than sight or sound. One astronaut said he couldn't smell steak again without thinking of space. Another said it haunted him for weeks. It was the smell of everything and nothing, the aftertaste of silence. The first sniff of space wasn't loud, it didn't shout, but it stayed with them like a whisper on the edge of memory. Gunpowder and BBQ. The words astronauts used were oddly specific. Gunpowder, barbecue, burnt almonds. These weren't just poetic guesses, they were attempts to describe the impossible. How do you explain a scent that doesn't belong on Earth? You reach for what you know, even if it doesn't quite fit. But why those smells? Why not something floral or chemical or completely alien? The answer may lie in the chemistry of stars. When high-energy particles, like those from solar flares or cosmic rays, interact with the outer layers of a spacesuit, they can leave behind traces of ozone, hydrocarbons, and nitrogen-rich compounds. These molecules, when exposed to oxygen inside the ship, resemble the same byproducts we get from burning meat or gunpowder. That's not just a coincidence, it's a kind of cosmic grilling. The universe cooking itself onto our boots. And yet it's not just about the science, there's something emotional about those descriptions. BBQ reminds us of home, gunpowder reminds us of sparks, something loud, something ancient. In space, it's the echo of those feelings, without the fire, but with the soul of it. So when astronauts say space smells like BBQ, they're not just being quirky. They're telling us space touched them in the oldest part of the brain, the part where memory and scent hold hands. Space doesn't smell like roses. It smells like something wild, something forgotten, something that says, you've been somewhere no one else has. Why space has no air, but has a scent? Now, you might be wondering, if space has no air, no wind, no atmosphere, how can anything smell at all? That's a good question. And like many things in science, the answer is, it's complicated. Scent, after all, is just molecules floating through the air, touching the tiny sensors in our nose. But in space, there is no air. So outside the spacecraft, you'd smell nothing, because your nose wouldn't survive long enough to try. But the moment you return inside, molecules that were in space come with you, on your gloves, on your helmet. They cling to your suit like stardust. They've been ionized, meaning they've been energized by radiation and charged by cosmic forces. When you open the airlock, those space-kissed molecules hit the warm, oxygen-rich environment of your ship, and boom, a reaction, a scent, a tiny chemical firework, just for a moment, just enough to make your brain go, what is that? It's not the smell of space. It's the smell of space's leftovers meeting Earth's breath, like smelling someone's jacket and getting a trace of where they've been. That scent is space's silent postcard, where the smell comes from. Scientists have tried to reproduce the smell astronauts describe. Why? Because understanding it helps us understand what space is made of. And it turns out, it's not just a random burnt smell, it's actually complex chemistry. Some of the key suspects? Polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. These are molecules made of carbon and hydrogen created in the aftermath of dying stars, supernovas. They float through space, settle on everything, and cling to surfaces. They're the same molecules found in burnt meat, exhaust fumes, and yes, charcoal. Other elements might include ozone, which gives off a sharp, almost bleachy scent. And then there's the metal tang, likely from ionized iron or copper-like particles clinging to the fabric of the suit. But here's the wonder. These molecules are ancient. Some of them are older than Earth itself, floating through the galaxy for billions of years before ending up on a glove, then reacting with air and tickling the nose of a human just back from the stars. It's like the past, burning a quiet candle in the present. Where the smell comes from is a place beyond words and right in your lungs. Spacesuits as time capsules. Think of a spacesuit not just as protection, but as a collector. Every time an astronaut steps outside, their suit is touched by the solar wind, by atomic fragments from the sun, by molecules that may have come from a star that exploded before the dinosaurs walked Earth. That suit becomes a time capsule. When the astronaut comes back in and takes off the helmet, what they're really smelling isn't just space, but time. The scent of an ancient journey, traces of stars, footprints of the cosmos. In a way, they're breathing in stories that no one else will ever hear. That's why the scent matters. It's not just a curiosity, it's a connection, a reminder that space is not just distance, it's history, it's chemistry, it's memory. And the suits, those thick, silent armor, hold that memory close. They're not clean, they're not sterile, they're messy with molecules, with secrets, with the soft dust of silence. So next time you see a spacesuit in a museum, imagine the scent it once carried. Imagine a human, heart-pounding, breathing in the universe, one molecule at a time. Neil Armstrong's nose. It's easy to forget that the first person to walk on the moon also became the first human being to smell lunar dust. When Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin stepped back into the lunar module after their walk, They removed their helmets and noticed a powerful scent clinging to their suits. Armstrong later described it as wet ashes. Aldrin said it reminded him of burnt charcoal, not metallic, not plastic, but like the air after fireworks. Moon dust, it turned out, had a very particular odour. Even though it hadn't touched air for billions of years, the moment it entered the cabin and met oxygen, it spoke, through chemistry, through memory, through the human nose. No one expected the moon to smell. Scientists had prepared for radiation, temperature swings and gravity differences. But scent, that wasn't on the checklist, yet once again, smell slipped quietly into the story. The smell lingered, not just in the air, but in their minds, for days, maybe for life. Imagine stepping into history and carrying a smoky whisper of it in your suit. Neil Armstrong's nose wasn't looking for poetry, but it found some anyway. Scent of the ISS. While space itself may be silent, the International Space Station is full of subtle smells. Some expected, others not so much. Astronauts have described the ISS as having a very distinct scent, a mixture of machine oil, burnt metal, cleaning fluids, human sweat, and plastic. A little like a mechanical garage in orbit, not unpleasant, but not fresh either. In microgravity, air doesn't circulate the way it does on Earth. There's no natural rise and fall of warm and cool air, so smells tend to linger, even small ones. A dab of shampoo, a warmed meal, a dropped tool rubbed with grease. They drift and mix, forming a kind of olfactory fingerprint of life in low Earth orbit. Sometimes it's comforting, the smell of your crewmates, your gear, your ship. Other times, it's intense, too strong, too odd, too stale, but it's always there. And occasionally, when a hatch opens, a new smell enters, one that rode in on a suit from outside, sharp, smoky, unfamiliar, the scent of space knocking on the door. Even in the controlled air of the ISS, silence finds a way to carry a signature. What about the moon? Moon dust has never touched rain or wind or any of the usual sculptors of Earth. It's sharp, dry, and in its own way, alive with chemistry. When astronauts tracked moon dust back into the lunar module, it got everywhere. It clung to boots, gloves, sleeves. It stuck to fabric like Velcro. It smelled like fire, or more precisely, like ashes after a fire. Not smoky, but scorched. One astronaut said it reminded him of burnt gunpowder, but finer, drier, older. The dust's smell wasn't from oxygenated reactions on the moon. It came alive only when it entered the air of the spacecraft. That moment, when oxygen met moon dust, released volatile particles trapped in the grains. It was the smell of minerals rearranging themselves in the breath of life. Some scientists believe it was the jagged edges of the dust, sharper than glass shards, that made the chemistry so reactive. It was, quite literally, space shrapnel coated in time. The moon had a scent not because it wanted to, but because the universe has a way of making even rocks. Whisper stories. What about the moon? It smelled like memory, like burnt silence, like a place no one had touched, until now. Why do we remember smells so strongly? You've likely experienced this yourself, a whiff of perfume or certain kind of soap, and suddenly you're 10 years old again, standing in your grandmother's kitchen or walking through a school hallway. Smell has a direct line to memory. It bypasses logic. It ignores words. It goes straight to the limbic system, the emotional brain. That's why a single scent can bring tears, or comfort, or longing. In space, this power becomes amplified. There are fewer smells to distract you, fewer breezes to sweep them away. So each scent, each faint note of metallic dust or engine oil, becomes a bookmark in time. Astronauts say they remember space smells long after they've forgotten technical details. They remember the feeling of the smell, the emotion it triggered, the strangeness of it, the realness of it. This is why the smell of space matters. It doesn't just describe a chemical, it writes a memory into the mind, permanent, weightless, and quiet, like a scent-shaped postcard from the universe. The human nose in 0G. Smelling in space is complicated. In zero gravity, your body behaves differently. Fluids shift upward, including mucus and blood. Your nose may feel stuffed. Your sinuses pressurize. So smelling becomes muted, fuzzy, not quite right. But that doesn't mean astronauts don't smell things. It just means the experience is different, more internal, more subtle, more dreamlike. Imagine trying to sniff a flower while floating, and instead of a strong scent, you get a soft pulse, a chemical whisper that passes through your memory before it reaches your nose. Astronauts report certain smells becoming stronger than others: metal, plastic, body odor, anything that clings, anything that builds. There's no breeze to clear the air, only fans and filters, so smells mingle like old friends. And when they return to Earth, the first thing many astronauts notice is the smell of grass, soil, the ocean, life. They breathe it in like they've been holding their breath for months. The human nose in space may not work perfectly, but it remembers. And when gravity returns, so do the smells. And with them, the full memory of silence, dust, and home. No wind, no waves, just scent. Space doesn't carry wind, it doesn't carry waves. There's no rustle, no echo, no soft breeze brushing against your face. It is still, utterly still. And yet, somehow astronauts have smelled it. This feels like a contradiction. No air means no scent, right? But in the hush of space, particles still exist. Not many, not like Earth, but enough to brush against a suit, to cling to a boot, to hide in the seams of a glove. And when those fragments come back inside, when they meet the oxygen, the pressure, the warmth of a human habitat, they unlock, they bloom, they whisper. You don't smell space itself, you smell its traces, its residue, its gentle breath on the edge of memory. There's no wind to carry scent, but scent still finds a way, because in silence, even molecules can speak. The scent doesn't ride the air, it rides your story. That moment when you step inside, unbuckle your helmet, and breathe something that didn't come from Earth, that quiet moment matters more than any storm ever could. Space is a vacuum, but not empty. If you could hold a jar of space, what would you find inside? Most people imagine space as pure emptiness, a nothingness so complete that nothing could survive in it. But that's not quite true. Space is a vacuum, yes, but it's not empty. There are particles, atoms, dust, tiny molecules drifting between stars. Some of them are born in stellar nurseries, the birthplaces of stars. Others are older than Earth, flung out from dying suns, carried on solar wind, or scattered by cosmic collisions. These molecules drift for billions of years. Sometimes they collect in clouds, sometimes they float alone, and every so often, one of them finds its way to a suit, to a spacecraft, to a curious human waiting just inside the airlock. When we say space smells, we're talking about those particles, the silent passengers of the cosmos. They don't say much, but when warmed by breath, lit by oxygen, they tell a story. A vacuum doesn't mean absence. Sometimes it means waiting, waiting for someone to come along and notice what's been drifting in silence. All along, the odor of cosmic death. What does a dying star smell like? That might sound like a strange question, and it is. But science, oddly enough, gives us hints. When a star explodes, a supernova, it throws off not just light and sound, but molecules. Some of those molecules are aromatic, literally. Aromatic hydrocarbons are the building blocks of smell, the same kinds of structures that give scent to burning wood, to grilled meat, to incense. The universe, in its most violent moments, releases compounds that, if we could safely sniff them, might smell oddly familiar. These aren't gentle smells. They're sharp, metallic, burnt. The odor of transformation, of endings. And those molecules drift on, not into lungs, but into gas clouds, asteroid belts, maybe even comets, and someday perhaps into a suit, or a machine, or a memory. The smell of cosmic death is not perfume, it is the ashes of stars becoming seeds for something new. And when astronauts describe the scent of space as smoky, metallic, charred, maybe they're smelling the ghosts of stars that died long before we were born. What stars might smell like. Now imagine, if you could get close to a star, not too close of course, just close enough to sense it, what would it smell like? Our sun, for instance, is mostly hydrogen and helium. These gases don't have a scent in the traditional sense, but stars are more than just gases. They forge elements, carbon, oxygen, iron, in their cores. They release radiation. They heat and ionize everything around them. So the space around a star? It's full of particles, high-energy molecules, and when those particles brush against matter, like a satellite or a suit, they might leave behind tiny chemical scars. Echoes of heat, burnt edges, sparked molecules, smells that don't exist until someone returns home and opens the airlock. A star might not have a smell on its own, but it creates the ingredients for one. It bakes the cosmic kitchen. Astronauts don't smell the star itself, they smell what it touched. What stars might smell like is not sweetness, not freshness, but fire, creation, the moment before something becomes something else. And somehow our brains recognize it, even if we don't know why. Black hole breath. Now, this one may be more poetic than scientific, but let's imagine, for just a moment, what the edge of a black hole might feel like to the senses. Could it smell like something? Black holes, of course, have no surface, no air, no scent. But the area around a black hole, the accretion disk, is chaotic. Matter spiraling in, heated to millions of degrees, torn apart by gravity. It is a furnace of unimaginable violence. The particles flying around this region, crushed, broken, ionized, could theoretically form molecules. Those molecules might be the last thing an atom does before it disappears into forever. Would they smell? If you had a magical suit and somehow dipped your hand into the edge of the event horizon, maybe a few particles would cling to your glove. Maybe you'd carry them back. And when oxygen kissed them in your cabin, a scent, just for a moment, maybe it would smell like burning iron, like the end of something old, or maybe like nothing at all. Black hole breath, if it exists, would be the scent of silence folding in on itself, a whisper from a place where no light escapes. Saturn's rings and Titan's fog. If you were to drift near Saturn, slow and steady, not rushing, you might find the silence almost too beautiful to describe. But Saturn doesn't just glow with elegance, it also whispers in chemistry. Its famous rings, so delicate from afar, are made of ice, dust, and ancient debris, each fragment holding tiny stories from long-forgotten collisions. Though you couldn't smell them directly in the vacuum, if particles from those rings clung to your ship or suit and followed you back inside, they might release a scent. Cold, clean, maybe slightly metallic, like chilled iron or snow packed with stardust. but it's Saturn's moon Titan that would carry a stronger perfume. Titan's thick atmosphere is laced with methane, ethane, and complex hydrocarbons, some of the very molecules found in fuel, smoke, and even certain perfumes on Earth. If you stepped into Titan's fog, protected of course, you might detect a ghost of gasoline or something like nail polish remover drifting silently in the air. It wouldn't be a pleasant scent, but it would be unforgettable. A smell made from ancient chemistry and alien weather. Saturn's rings shimmer in light, and Titan's fog. Well, it holds the aroma of a world that dreams in hydrocarbons. Jupiter's ammonia storms. Jupiter is massive, a planet so huge you could fit 1,300 Earths inside it. But it's not the size that overwhelms you. It's the layers of swirling gas, raging storms, and smell. Jupiter's upper atmosphere is dominated by hydrogen and helium, scentless to the human nose. But lower down, deeper into the planet's violent cloud layers, we find ammonia. Sharp, acrid, eye-watering. On Earth, we associate ammonia with cleaning supplies, farmyards, and certain industrial areas. But on Jupiter, it's part of the planet's breath. If molecules from Jupiter's clouds somehow hitched a ride on a probe and were released inside a pressurized lab, they might sting the nose. A sourness, a chemical bite. And yet those very molecules are part of what gives Jupiter its beautiful bands, its reddish tints, its great swirling eye. The smell, in theory, would be intense, but it's also the scent of motion, of turbulence, of a planet that never rests. Jupiter's storms may look elegant, but they carry a violent perfume, a reminder that beauty and chaos can share the same breath. Comets carrying scents across time. Imagine something small and ancient, hurtling through space, trailing a ghostly tail behind it. That's a comet, an icy traveller from the far edges of the solar system. But what you might not know is that comets carry scent. When sunlight warms a comet's surface, frozen gases and molecules are released. This outgassing creates a thin atmosphere around the comet, called a coma, filled with volatile chemicals. In 2014, when the Rosetta spacecraft landed on Comet 67P, it carried sensors to analyze those chemicals. The result? A strange mix. Hydrogen sulfide, which smells like rotten eggs, ammonia, formaldehyde, even traces of alcohol. Imagine a scent that's part barnyard, part cleaning supply, part spoiled wine, and you have an idea of what a comet might smell like. But here's the twist. Those very molecules may have seeded Earth with the building blocks of life, so while they stink by Earth standards, they are also sacred in a way. The smell of beginnings. Comets don't just carry ice and dust. They carry stories and the distant drifting scent of creation. Earth's scent from space. You'd think the only people who know what Earth smells like are those living on it. But astronauts say otherwise. When they're aboard the International Space Station, orbiting silently above the world, there comes a moment, sometimes unexpected, when they open a supply hatch or return from a spacewalk and they smell something familiar. Earth. Not all of Earth, of course. Not mountains or oceans. But a hint. A shadow. The smell of soil sealed into packaging. The scent of human-made materials. The trace of air from home. Some say it's the smell of people, of breath, of food. Others say it's more emotional than chemical, a phantom scent triggered by memory. Because when you're 250 miles above the surface, the idea of home becomes sharper, more delicate. The smell of Earth, then, isn't one thing. It's a collection of associations, a whisper of forests, the ghost of rain, the softness of family. When you've been surrounded by nothing but metal, silence, and drifting dust, Even the faintest trace of Earth can feel like being hugged by the planet itself. The scent of silence. Can silence have a smell? On paper, no. But in the way humans experience the world, maybe it does. Imagine stepping into a room you haven't visited in years. No one's been there. It's still, dusty, quiet, and yet you smell the silence, a mustiness, a memory, a texture in your nose that has no name. In space, silence is everywhere, but astronauts say it doesn't feel like emptiness. It feels full, like something waiting. And when they describe the smell that greets them after a spacewalk, the metallic burn, the soft ash, they're not just describing molecules, they're describing a presence in absence, a scent that means you've left the world behind and returned with something wordless. The scent of silence isn't loud or harsh. It's quiet, lingering, and oddly comforting, like smelling the last page of a book or the final note of a lullaby. It reminds us that even when the universe has no voice, it still has a breath. And sometimes we get to smell it, scent as a time machine. There's something funny about smell. It doesn't just stay in the nose, it slips through time. One faint scent of rain, of dust, of old wood, and you're suddenly 10 years old again, standing by a window or walking through your grandfather's garden. A moment you didn't even know you remembered comes alive again. In space, this effect becomes more intense. Astronauts report that certain smells on the space station, sweat, plastic, cleaning fluid, begin to anchor memories. The scent of the same soap becomes a thread between days. The aroma of rehydrated food starts to feel like home. And when they come back to Earth, even something as simple as fresh grass can send them back in their minds, not to childhood, but to orbit, to silence, to floating, to awe. Smell in this way becomes a time machine, and in the absence of gravity, scent becomes gravity of its own, pulling memories down from orbit and pressing them gently against the heart. The limbic system's quiet influence. Deep inside your brain, there's a quiet ancient region called the limbic system. It doesn't speak in words. It speaks in feelings. It's the part of you that holds memory, emotion and instinct, and smell, more than any other sense, goes straight to it. You don't think a smell. You feel it. That's why astronauts sometimes get overwhelmed by a scent that seems minor to the rest of us. It's not the smell itself, it's the memory attached, the emotion, the stored echo. On the ISS, where every day smells mostly the same, small variations hit harder. A new cargo container might carry a hint of leather, a snack pouch might release a ghost of cinnamon, and suddenly they're somewhere else. A childhood kitchen, a high school locker, a garage workshop, a hospital hallway. Their mind doesn't ask permission, it just goes. The limbic system doesn't need gravity. It only needs a molecule or two and a quiet moment to open a memory you forgot you locked away. Astronauts missing Earth's smell. They rarely talk about it in interviews, but if you listen closely, there's a common thread in many astronauts' stories. They miss the smell of Earth, not just one smell, but all of it. Fresh soil, rain on pavement, the warmth of skin, the salt of ocean wind. In orbit, life becomes filtered. Recycled air, packaged food, mechanical scent. Even the sweat smells different because it doesn't evaporate. It floats, lingers, becomes part of the station's shared breath. Some astronauts say it's the first thing they notice when they come home. Not gravity, not noise, but scent. That first deep breath of Earth air, it's emotional, immediate, a quiet kind of joy. The smell of trees, of cities, of soap, of dirt, things we barely notice, suddenly becomes sacred. It's not nostalgia, it's sensory starvation, and Earth's smell is how they return to themselves. The first breath back home. Imagine this. You've been in space for 6 months, you haven't smelled rain, or felt wind, or taken a breath that wasn't filtered through a machine. Then the capsule lands, the door opens, and you breathe. One breath, thick with earth, soil, sky, plants, all at once. It hits like music in a silent room. Some astronauts cry, not from sadness, but from the sudden flood of memory. You didn't realize how much you missed the smell of the planet. You don't just smell grass, you remember running in it. You don't just smell a breeze, you remember lying in it. The scent of Earth doesn't just enter your lungs, it enters your soul. That first breath isn't just biology, it's belonging. A reintroduction to gravity and to home. A reminder that even though you went far, you were always tethered to something warm and breathing. The role of smell in belonging. We don't often realize it, but smell is one of the quiet ways we feel connected to places, to people, to ourselves. You walk into your childhood home, and the scent makes you feel safe, even if you haven't been there in years. A shirt that still smells like someone you love. A book that carries the scent of its old paper. These aren't just objects, they're emotional landmarks. In space, astronauts lose many of these familiar markers. No pine trees, no hot pavement, no old coats or fresh bread. So the smells that do exist, even odd ones like engine oil or electrical panels, become comforting. Because they're shared, they're constant, they become symbols of team, of routine, of being part of something. Smell creates a kind of invisible belonging, one you carry in your breath, one that reminds you, quietly, without saying a word, that you're not alone, even in the dark, even in silence. Scent gives you a place to be. When dreams carry smell, there's a strange magic to dreaming. Sometimes you hear music that doesn't exist, see places you've never been, and occasionally you smell something that isn't there at all. It's rare but real, dream scent. Some astronauts have described this, smelling coffee in their dreams, or wildflowers, or home cooking, even though they haven't been near those things for months. It's as if the brain, missing that input, paints it in sleep. The limbic system, still hungry for connection, whispers old memories through smell. And sometimes, just for a moment, it brings you home. You don't smell garlic, you smell your grandmother's kitchen. You don't smell rain, you remember your first kiss under a storm. Dream scent doesn't follow logic, it follows longing. And in the silence of space, the nose may sleep, but the soul remembers. And every once in a while, the scent of something deeply human finds its way into a dream. When there's nothing left to smell, what happens when there's no scent at all? No flowers, no books, no wind, no fire. At first the absence is peaceful, but over time the brain starts to ache for stimulus. The emotional tones get muted, the memories fade sharper. In space, many astronauts say they stop noticing scent until something new appears, then it hits like lightning. Because our bodies are built for variety, to wake up to morning air and sleep to pillow musk, to smell sunlight on stone and lemon in the sink. But when nothing changes, the brain starts to turn down its sensitivity, not in sadness, but in efficiency. It's like living in grayscale, not pain, but pale. And so the tiniest change, a new supply package, a letter from home, becomes monumental. Smell returns, emotion follows, and the world feels real again. Sometimes it's not what you smell that matters, but realizing you were missing it all along. How the body adapts to scent absence. You might not notice this, but your body is constantly tracking scent. It tells you if food is safe, if a room is clean, if someone is nearby. But what if scent is gone? In orbit, astronauts slowly adjust to the absence. Their noses don't stop working, but their brains begin to deprioritize scent. The olfactory bulb, the part of the brain that processes smell, gets less and less excited, like a musician in a silent room. But the moment scent returns, through packaging, sweat, or earth cargo, that musician picks up the violin again. In science, we call this sensory adaptation. The brain learns to dial down the unchanging and turn up what's new. This is why the first flower you smell after months in space feels like heaven. Not because it's rare, but because it reminds your brain what it forgot it loved. Your body doesn't need scent to survive, but to feel alive, it absolutely does. The phantom sense of the mind. Sometimes, even without real scent, we think we smell something. These are called phantom smells, the brain's way of filling in gaps. In space, astronauts have reported them, the faint scent of burning toast, of coffee, even perfume, all in places where those things don't exist. Scientists believe this happens when the olfactory system is underused, like a singer humming just to feel useful again. The brain fills the silence, and sometimes the phantom scent is emotional, triggered by music, words, a photo, a memory. Smelling something that isn't there doesn't always mean something's wrong. It might just mean the heart is whispering through the senses, that even in silence, in metal, in vacuum, your mind is still trying to make meaning, still trying to bring Earth into the stars. And sometimes a phantom smell is the body's way of remembering where it belongs. The echo of Earth. We often think space is empty, but for those who leave Earth, it's never truly gone. Earth follows, not in gravity, but in scent. A fleck of soil on a glove, the odour of old fabric, the oil from human skin. These things linger. In orbit, the smell of Earth echoes quietly in corners. A t-shirt smells of laundry. A notebook smells of wood. Even silence carries the breath of home. The body remembers, and so does the spacecraft. And when the hatch opens for the final return, Earth rushes in, not with a roar, but with aroma. The smell of green, of air, of sun-baked stone. A smell that says, you're back. Not just on the planet, but inside the world again. Smell is the gentle bridge between orbit and belonging, and even though silence rules the stars, Earth always finds a way to follow you there. How the nose trains the brain. We often think the brain leads everything, but in many quiet ways, it's the nose that teaches the brain what to remember. Every time you smell fire, your brain learns safety check. When you smell baking, it learns comfort. When you smell something unfamiliar, it learns to pay attention. Even in space, where smells are rare, the nose still trains the mind. It marks important moments, like a scent trail across memory, opening a sealed container, fixing a burnt wire, even catching a whiff of someone's hair. The brain notes it all, quietly, deeply, and later, long after the mission, a faint smell back on Earth might bring it all flooding back. Because scent doesn't just sit in the nose, it instructs the brain where you are, who you are, what matters, and what's worth storing. Scent is the quiet teacher of the mind, and space is its strangest classroom. The unspoken language of scent. Words can lie, faces can be controlled, but scent tells the truth. It's a silent language, one that lives between people. The natural smell of a person, a room, a day, tells us more than we realize. In space, where there are few smells, this language becomes louder. You begin to recognize your crewmates not by voice, but by scent, the subtle difference in their suit, the shampoo they use, the food they reheated. Without Earth's noise, smell becomes a kind of communication. Someone's mood can be smelled. Stress has a scent, so does calm. Even trust has a faint warm aroma. This is why long space missions rely so heavily on emotional harmony. When you live in scent proximity, every molecule speaks. Even when words run out, a familiar smell can say, "You're not alone." Scent speaks, even in silence. Do planets have a smell? It's a strange question, isn't it? But one that scientists and poets alike have wondered. If Earth smells of life, what do the other planets smell like? Venus, with its thick sulfur clouds, would reek of rotten eggs and acid. Mars, dusty and iron-rich, might smell like blood-soaked metal. Jupiter, possibly ammonia and cleaning fluid. Uranus and Neptune, methane and frostbite. But we don't really know. We can guess, simulate, infer, but we haven't stuck our noses outside and taken a breath. Still, these imaginary scents help us feel closer to distant worlds, like trying to smell a photograph or breathe in a dream. It's not about accuracy, it's about intimacy. To wonder what a planet smells like is to admit that you want to know it, not just its gravity or orbit, but its character. Scent humanizes the cosmos. And even if you never smell Saturn's rings, you can still imagine them, like cold pearls in smoky silence, smell in total isolation. There's something eerie about scent when you're completely alone. Not the kind of alone you get on a quiet walk, but deep space alone. No birds, no trees, no breeze, no earth. In that isolation, scent becomes a lifeline. The familiar smell of your sleeping bag, the trace of home you left on your shirt, a sealed pouch that smells vaguely like apples. These aren't just smells, they're anchors. In long-duration space missions, psychologists have suggested using scent therapy to keep astronauts emotionally grounded. A napkin that smells like your mother's kitchen, a wristband that smells like your partner's cologne, even a box of earth dirt sealed tight, because in complete silence and complete aloneness, a scent is proof that Earth still exists and that you came from somewhere warm, somewhere full of trees and wind and people. Even one breath of that memory can keep the spirit tethered. The last breath before launch, before an astronaut leaves Earth, there is a quiet ritual. It's not official, not documented, but it happens almost every time. Just before boarding, they stop. They take one last deep breath of Earth air. No helmet, no suit, no filters, just sky and grass and human life. That breath isn't for oxygen, it's for the soul. They know it might be weeks, months, before they smell that again, and the body knows it too. So they pause, breathe, inhale the scent of everything they love, and store it deep inside, like a message in a bottle, to be opened again, someday. It's one of the most human things we do, to breathe in the world before leaving it, because in that one breath is a memory stronger than gravity, and the silence of space will never erase it. The invisible hand of smell in survival. We don't often give it credit, but smell quietly protects us every day. Rotten food, smoky air, gas leaks. Before sight or sound, it's the nose that warns us. Even in space, where danger looks like blinking lights or pressure drops, smell still plays its part. Astronauts are trained to detect odd scents, like electrical burning, mold, or chemical leaks in closed systems. A strange smell might mean overheating wires, or a small gas release. Sometimes it's the only clue something's wrong. One astronaut once described waking up to a faint bitter scent. He reported it, and they later found a tiny leak in the CO2 scrubber. So even in high-tech silence, the body still plays ancient defense. The nose isn't outdated, It's deeply wise. It doesn't care about formulas or screens. It simply knows when something is off. And even in orbit, survival may depend on that invisible signal. Why we notice, smell more in silence. Have you ever noticed how the smell of tea feels stronger in a quiet room? Or how the scent of books hits harder in a library? There's a reason for that. When the ears are still, the brain turns up the other senses. It listens through the nose. Astronauts live in a kind of white noise silence, the hum of fans, the soft mechanical breath of life support systems. But emotionally, it's quiet. And in that hush, small smells grow louder. A crewmate's socks, a container of warm food. Even their own breath begins to take on character. In silence, we become scent listeners. And without Earth's daily distractions, our awareness deepens. This is why astronauts often recall scents more vividly than sounds, and why memory seems sharper through smell. Because when noise fades, the nose speaks louder, and the soul listens. The scent of equipment and electricity. Space doesn't smell like flowers or forests, but it does have a smell, one that clings to gear and metal. Many astronauts describe a burnt scent, like welding fumes, hot breaks, or fireworks. After a spacewalk, when they return to the airlock and remove their suits, that smell drifts out. No one knows exactly what causes it. It might be ozone or atomic oxygen reacting with suit materials. But it's consistent, and over time, that harsh, acrid aroma becomes comforting. It means the suit worked, the walk was successful, they returned safe. They begin to associate it with triumph and survival. Just like a mechanic might come to love the smell of oil, or a pilot, the sharp tang of jet fuel. Astronauts fall in love with the scent of their tools, because in space, even the mechanical has memory, and the smell of equipment becomes strangely sacred. Smell as an emotional trigger in space. Here's something quietly powerful. Scent is the fastest way to make someone cry. Not music, not even photos. Just one unexpected smell, a certain shampoo, the inside of a coat, a forgotten perfume, and the floodgates open. In orbit, these moments are rare, but deep. A birthday package from home, a cloth that smells like your dog, a snack that tastes faintly of childhood. It's not sadness, it's overwhelm, because in a place where you've learned to be strong, smell reminds you of how human you are. It catches you off guard, cracks the armor, and for a moment, you're not a scientist or explorer. You're just a kid, smelling your mother's sweater in the laundry, or your father's garage on a rainy day. Smell holds emotional power, even when gravity is gone. Why silence makes everything sacred. In the end, it's not just about smell, it's about what surrounds it. Silence, the kind of silence that's not just the absence of noise, but the presence of stillness. In that stillness, every scent becomes more vivid, every breath becomes intentional. Even recycled air takes on meaning, because you're aware of it. You feel your inhale, you notice the exhale. Silence gives room for smell to be felt, not just registered, to become memory, to become emotion. And when you're thousands of miles from home, in a tin can floating above Earth, those small sacred smells become everything. A lifeline, a meditation, a return. Silence doesn't erase the senses, it sharpens them, and in that sharpening, the scent of a thing becomes the soul of a thing. In silence, we remember what matters most, and every breath becomes a prayer. Can you miss a smell without knowing it? Here's something strange. Sometimes, you miss something before you ever realize it's gone. In space, it happens with scent, not suddenly, but slowly, like a light dimming over days. You don't notice the absence of morning dew or the faint spice of street food, or even the quiet funk of a crowded train. Until one day, someone opens a vacuum-sealed bag of earth soil and it hits you. Your chest tightens, you inhale sharply, and in that moment you realize your nose and your soul had been hungry. That's the thing about scent. It doesn't leave with a bang, it just fades. And when it returns, even briefly, it reminds you of what being human feels like. Yes, you can miss a smell you didn't even remember existed. And when it returns, it's not just familiar, it's healing. The strange way metal holds memory. Ever smelled an old coin or a doorknob after the rain? There's a scent to metal, cold, sharp, almost electric. In space, where nearly everything is made of metal, you begin to notice its character. Suits, panels, tools, clips, doors. They all hold a quiet trace of scent. But here's the twist. Metal doesn't smell by itself. It smells when it reacts with oils from your skin. So in a way, you're not just smelling the metal, you're smelling yourself, reflected back, like scent memory. Over time, astronauts begin to recognize individual pieces of gear, not just by sight, but by feel and smell. This wrench smells faintly of gloves. That latch carries the scent of recycled moisture. The station becomes like a giant memory box. Even the cold metal holds emotion, because it's touched by you and changed by you. And when you return years later, you can still smell the shape of your own presence, smell of the moon. As described by astronauts, the moon, dry, ancient, and silent, but oddly enough, it has a smell. When Apollo astronauts returned to the lunar module after moonwalks, they noticed it immediately. The dust on their suits gave off a strong odor. They called it burnt gunpowder or fireworks after they go out. Sharp, bitter, metallic. But here's what's fascinating. Lunar dust has no moisture, so the smell likely came from chemical reactions as it hit the oxygen inside the cabin. Still, the smell lingered, and it left a strange emotional imprint on those who walked the moon, because it was unexpected. Not just a visual or physical encounter, but an olfactory one. The moon has had a scent, not sweet or familiar, but real. And it reminded the astronauts that even silence, even dust, has a story to tell. Sometimes the cosmos doesn't speak with stars. It whispers through ash. Why our nose doesn't stop working in space? You might wonder, in microgravity, do our bodies forget how to smell? The answer is no. Even though fluids shift and congestion can happen, your nose keeps on doing its job. The challenge isn't the nose, it's what there is to smell. With no air movement outside the spacecraft and filtered recycled air inside, the range of scent is limited. But the receptors in your nose remain active. They still detect molecules, still interpret, still send signals to the brain. In fact, astronauts often report becoming more sensitive to smell, because in a quiet environment, the brain amplifies the signals it gets, like a person in a dark room noticing the faintest flicker of light. The nose in space picks up even the smallest aroma, which is why the scent of instant coffee or warm plastic can suddenly feel overwhelmingly emotional. Your nose never gives up. Even in the void, it waits patiently for a whisper of earth to come drifting through. The sacredness of breathing in space. Breathing. The thing we do 20,000 times a day without thought. On Earth, it's automatic, unseen. But in space, it becomes sacred. Each inhale is a choice. Each exhale, a reminder that you're alive, against all odds. There are no trees, no oceans, no breeze, just machines humming behind walls, delivering life. And with each breath, you smell where you are. Sometimes it's mechanical, sometimes faintly metallic, sometimes just recycled air. But every so often, when you open a sealed pouch of earth food or unwrap a cloth from home, the breath becomes blessed. It carries memory, emotion, grounding. Breathing in space is not just survival, it's communion with the body, with the planet, with time. And in those silent seconds, you remember what you came from. You realize that even here, floating in silence, you are still human, still breathing, still remembering, still home in your own lungs. Why Earth's smell feels so emotional after space. Coming home from space isn't just about gravity, it's about scent and how it ambushes you. The moment the capsule door opens, astronauts say it hits them like a wave. Grass, dirt, rain, people, heat. One called it like being hugged by the whole planet. Another just cried, no words, just breathing, because smell is more than particles. It's presence. You forget how complex Earth smells until you leave it. We live surrounded by thousands of invisible signatures, each one tied to a moment, a person, a place. And when you return, every breath is a reunion. That's why Earth doesn't just smell like a planet, it smells like belonging, like everything you forgot you needed, and everything that quietly waited for you to come home. The quiet loneliness of a scentless world. Imagine a world without smell, not because you're sick, but because the environment has no scent to offer. No forests, no frying pans, no soap, just plastic, steel, filters, tubing. This is space. It's not that your nose is broken, it's that the world is silent, even to your senses. And that quiet, it gets into your emotions. You stop feeling like you're in a place and start feeling like you're floating through absence. Astronauts sometimes describe it as emptiness that follows you. It's subtle, but deep, because scent gives shape to feeling. When it's missing, so is some of your human orientation. Not just where you are, but who you are. In a scentless world, you start to crave even the smell of garbage. Not because it's pleasant, but because it's real. It means something exists. The smell of emptiness. Here's a question. Can emptiness have a smell? Not in the traditional way, but in how it feels. Space has a scent only in its aftertouch, when it brushes against material, burns particles, or oxidizes cloth. But in its raw form, it's scentless. And yet astronauts say emptiness feels like something, like a dry, sterile cold, like a place that's never known decay, or birth, or breath. They say the emptiness has texture, not a smell in the nose, but a sense in the soul, like walking into an ancient cave where nothing has ever lived or died. It's that emotional void. And sometimes when the spacecraft is silent and the systems hum softly, that emptiness creeps in, not with a bang, but with a lack. A lack so complete, it feels like a smell your body doesn't know how to name. The power of a sealed envelope in space. One of the smallest, most sacred items astronauts carry is often a sealed envelope, not for information, but for scent. A piece of fabric from a child's blanket, a swatch from a partner's shirt, a pressed leaf from home. They open it only rarely, but when they do, it's overwhelming. The scent rushes out, and for a few seconds the cold metal world melts. They are back in the kitchen, on the couch, in a garden, on a beach, all from one breath. That envelope becomes holy, because in a place where nothing smells like love, you have to bring love with you, not just in memory, but in molecule. And that's what a sealed scent does. It makes time collapse. It makes home portable. And it reminds you you are never really far from those you love. Silence is the space between every scent. We often forget this, But silence isn't just the absence of sound, it's the space where meaning is allowed to form. The same is true for smell. You don't notice a scent unless there's a stillness before it and after it, like punctuation for the nose. The silence between each scent is what gives it weight, and in space, that silence is vast, which makes every small whiff feel monumental. A sip of coffee, a packet of food, a shirt worn yesterday, each one is elevated because it rises out of nothing. That's why space doesn't just make you smell less, it makes you feel more. Because when the world is still and your senses are waiting, even a whisper of cinnamon can feel like a symphony. That's the lesson of space. In silence, you become more aware of every breath, every scent, every moment you didn't know you were lucky to have. The first time someone smelled Earth from orbit. There's a moment very few people have lived, the moment when you're high above Earth and you see it, blue and glowing. But then, through a tiny filtered vent, you smell something familiar. One astronaut described it like this: "It was faint, but suddenly it hit me. Moisture, vegetation, a trace of ocean." He pressed his face against the panel, hoping to catch it again. It was barely there, but it was enough, and he said it felt like Earth had reached out to touch his nose. That was it. Not science, not data, just scent, raw and real. A moment of home, in a place where nothing else could give it. That's the quiet magic of space. You travel far, but Earth always finds a way to whisper back how one drop of scent can fill an entire module. On Earth, a smell stays mostly where you release it. In space, not so much, because in microgravity, air doesn't flow the same. There's no up for heat, no down for weight. So when you open something, say a food pouch or a sealed cloth, the scent particles disperse, like ghosts through the module. One drop of cologne, it could linger for hours. A strong spice, everyone smells it, even 2 rooms over. It's both funny and deeply human. Some astronauts learned this the hard way. One opened pickled garlic, another spilled a sauce. They became legends for the smell they unleashed. But there's beauty in this too, because in a place where so much is silent and technical, one tiny scent can become a shared memory, a single breath that ties everyone together. The unopened jar that carried Earth's forest. One astronaut carried a strange item in his personal bag, a mason jar, sealed tight, unopened for the entire mission. Inside, nothing but a few dried pine needles, a pinch of soil, a folded note. He said it wasn't for smelling every day, it was for remembering he could. Just knowing it was there, a breath of forest from his childhood, gave him peace. And on the last night before returning home, he cracked the jar open for just one breath. He cried, not because it smelled amazing, but because it smelled like himself, like the Earth version of him that still waited below. Sometimes it's not the strongest scent, but the most personal, that anchors your soul. What happens when you can't smell yourself anymore? Here's something unexpected. In space, people say you begin to forget your own scent. You wear the same clothes longer. Sweat evaporates differently. Your skin changes from the dry, recycled air. Slowly. Your personal smell fades, and that's oddly unsettling, because on Earth we don't notice, but scent is part of our identity. Our pillows, our clothes, our rooms. Without it, you start to feel dislocated, like a version of yourself is missing. Some astronauts keep a shirt from home, not for comfort, but for reminder, because scent isn't just hygiene, it's memory of self. And when you lose that, it's not just your nose that notices, it's your soul. How silence and scent teach us to be present. Here's what all of this leads to. In a world where we're surrounded by endless input, lights, alerts, pings, distractions, space offers a different lesson: silence and the slow return of awareness. When things go quiet, smell takes the lead, and suddenly you're here. You smell your tea, your sweater, your books, the floor, the rain, the room. You stop running ahead. That's what silence and scent do. They anchor you. They remind you that the world is full, not of noise, but of details. Tiny invisible things that carry love, history, and emotion. When you lose them, you ache. When they return, you weep. And that's what space teaches us: to feel more through less, to listen with the nose, to remember through a breath. The unseen comfort, hidden in familiar smells. There's a kind of peace we don't talk about much. It doesn't come from words or music or even light. It comes from scent. A sweater that smells like home, a notebook with pages that carry the faint breath of pencil and dust, even a grocery bag still warm with the scent of spice or soap. These are comforts that bypass thinking. They go straight to the soul, without knocking. In space, this comfort becomes rare and sacred. You don't realize how much scent calms you until it's gone. Then one night someone opens a small pack of cinnamon oats, and the whole module feels like a kitchen. No one says anything, but suddenly everyone smiles a little longer. That's what comfort smells like: familiar, invisible, unshakably human. Why scientists still study the scent of space? You might think this topic is poetic or personal, but science is still listening. NASA and ESA have studied the compounds behind what astronauts describe: hydrocarbons, aldehydes, sulfur, iron particles. Some smells mimic welding fumes, others echo the tang of ozone. But it's not just curiosity. Understanding scent in space helps us improve ventilation, mental health, food systems, even emergency detection. It also helps answer deeper questions. What does happen to scent molecules in a vacuum? How do they behave under cosmic radiation? And could other planets, in theory, carry their own scent signature? Imagine landing on Mars and catching the faintest whisper of rust and wind. Science isn't just measuring stars, it's quietly asking the nose, what else can you teach us? The scent of a place that has never known life. There's something haunting about this idea. The moon, Mars, deep space, places untouched by life. They have no flowers, no fire, no food, just dust, silence, and time. And yet when humans arrive, they carry scent with them, not because those places give off smells, but because we leave traces of ourselves. Every boot print, every fingerprint, a puff of air, a speck of breath. We are scent-bearing beings, carrying warmth into cold, memory into nothingness. That's why the first breath after re-entry, back on Earth, feels so overwhelming. You've been to a place that has never known breath, and when you return, the scent of soil suddenly feels sacred. How a single breath can change everything. Sometimes, it only takes one breath: a child smelling their parents' jacket, a traveller stepping into an old room, an astronaut opening a pouch of Earth air. One inhale, and the mind floods. Scent unlocks time in ways memory can't. You don't just remember the past, you relive it. And in that single breath, you're not in space anymore. You're on a porch, or in a library, or walking through grass barefoot. One breath can take you across light years of silence. That's why scent matters. It's not fluff. It's not decoration. It's a portal. Small, inhaled, forgotten, until it's not. And when it hits, you understand what it means to be human. The sleepy atom's final breath. So now, dear friend, We've come to the last breath of this journey. The atoms are still with us, quietly orbiting, bonding, floating, invisible, but never absent, and scent, the silent song of molecules, has walked with us through space, through silence, memory, and mystery. Now you know, space has no air, and yet it carries stories, not through sound, but through what clings to cloth, to dust, to heat, and through what lives inside you. Because you are a walking archive of scent, you carry the breath of oceans, the warmth of fire, the sweetness of your childhood. Even now, in sleep, your body listens, and as you drift, know this: even in the silence of space, there is something that always remembers where you've been, and that is the sleepy atom, still whispering, softly, into the dark.